Bord Gáis Energy, proud sponsor of the GAA All-Ireland Under-20 and Senior Hurling Championships. Hashtag Hurling to the Core.
Hello and welcome to the Throw-In Independent.ie's GAA podcast in association with Bord Gáis Energy. I'm Will Slattery and I'm delighted to be previewing the All-Ireland Hurling Championship today with none other than Michael Verney. Michael, hello.
How are you, Will?
Yeah, good, thanks. Looking forward to now that I guess it looks like the championship is going ahead. We can concentrate on-field matters for the most part. The hurling championship gets underway in a game that does double as a league final as well, Limerick versus Clare. But before we kick off, I might just go through the All-Ireland odds with you and just get your take on whether you think this is maybe an accurate representation of where teams are at going into it. So we have Limerick as favourites at 5-2, then Tipp at 10-3, Kilkenny at 9-2, Galway 6-1, Cork 13-2, Wexford 9-1, Waterford 16-1, Clare 22-1, Dublin 50-1, and Laois 500-1. Does that sound about right to you now as we head in? Limerick favourites with All Ireland champions Tipp just behind them.
I tell you what's a funny one, Will. When you look at when Tipperary were reigning champions going into any year, they were always nearly favourites the year after. They were vying for favourites probably with Kilkenny in 2011, but they were definitely heavy favourites in 2017, and the country was basically saying that they were unbeatable. Yeah. And now I even just looked at our jury in the Irish Independent magazine last Saturday, and they're coming in. Nobody tipped Tipp to win the All-Ireland, which is unbelievable in itself, including myself. Now, my opinion might have changed a small bit when I saw Mike Casey is out, and they have basically two of their full backline players, Mike Casey and Richie English, both out, whereas Tipperary, I think, have a clean bill of health coming into this year's championship. You're going to pick up knocks during it, but I think it's important not to be starting without anyone. Look at Limerick, they're starting without two or three players. Look at Clare, they're starting without a handful of players. That you don't want to be, in any way handicapped before you start. So I think, like if I was a betting man, which I am, I think Tipperary is probably the value at this stage. They only have to win 4 games to win the All-Ireland through the front door. Limerick have to win 5 and probably come through one of the hardest passages to win All-Ireland from a quarter-final, semi-final, final, and then the rest of the games. Of the other odds there, I couldn't have Cork that high up in winter conditions. I just couldn't have them that high up. Their league performances over the last decade or more just haven't suggested that this type of championship will suit them. But I think Limerick, Tipperary kind of vying for favouritism is about right. And just the fact that Kilkenny are facing the winners of Laois or Dublin in a Leinster semi-final and would be likely favourites heading into a Leinster final, they're probably about right there in third place, having kind of consolidated over the last couple of years and got themselves back to a really, really high level while it still looked like they were building and in transition. But yeah, it's very, very interesting. Tipperary are probably the value when you're looking at the odds, I'd say.
Yeah, and does reverting back to the more traditional format of provincial knockouts and then the qualifiers, does that change it in your mind in any way in terms of who would be best placed to go through it versus the round robin we've had the last 2 seasons?
Just from the point of view of a Kilkenny, maybe the Kilkenny are like looking like they should be in a Leinster final, all going well, in my opinion. Anyway, I can't see them not being in a Leinster final. So from their point of view, it's far more advantageous for them. For a Galway or a Wexford, it's not. You're going through the back door after being beaten in a Leinster semi-final, whichever one of them is. So it's obviously going to favour. Like, look at the Munster draw is totally skewed. You have Cork and Waterford. Waterford after picking up a serious blow there last night with the news that Pádraig Matney is out. Like, that will definitely dent their hopes. But they still only have to win 1 game to get to a Munster final, whereas in previous years they probably would have had to win 3. So it's advantageous for some. Cork, Waterford, Kilkenny. It's a disadvantage for like Clare. Clare are going to have to beat Limerick, the Munster champions and league champions from last year. They're going to have to beat Tipperary, and they're going to have to beat either Cork or Waterford to win a Munster.
They're 20-1 to win the Munster championship, but they're by far the longest odds in Munster. One thing before we maybe go into the 2 provincial previews, yellow Slitters has been a talking point. As someone who's played inter-county hurling yourself, like, how is this a mountain out of a molehill? Because some big names have weighed in and they're not happy.
Yeah, no, I just think it's a strange one. Well, I like the reasoning for bringing it in, but there's basically been no conversation. It's a classic kind of a GAA move in many instances. We're waiting so long for many other things to happen, and then all of a sudden they're just bringing in a luminous ball without really getting anybody's opinions on it. Like the white ball is synonymous with hurling. You can say that the luminous ball will maybe help with visibility and things like that. I'd be interested in one. The yellow ball that was used for the Super 11s. The rims are quite. The rims and the ball itself was quite dead. So it'd be interesting if it's just the exact same slitter, but it's yellow. I think that's okay. If the texture of the slitter changes or anything like that, I think then we have a problem. It's a very strange one to be bringing in this championship of all championships. But it's definitely going to be something different. Like will it affect players at all? Not really, but most players, I think, and most GA people and hurling people in particular are very traditional and don't like things to change. But it'll be interesting once it's in. It's very hard to see it been phased out again or anything like that, unless there's a problem with the texture of the ball, which there probably won't be. But listen, this is a crazy year. We might as well throw yellow slitters into the mix as well.
No, definitely. There'll be something to watch out for, especially, as I said, because a couple of big names in the sport have voiced their concerns. Anyway, look, Munster Championship. So, you mentioned Limerick, Clare this weekend, the winner playing Tipperary, and what could be a Limerick Tip clash that everyone would really like to see. Cork Water from the other side of the draw. You mentioned Tip going for back-to-back, and how the last two times in particular they've been heavy favourites. They haven't done it since the 1960s when, their glory era, where they did it twice in a short period of time. Will it help them not being the big favourites this time if they want to go again and retain that title? Like, because the last time you could argue that they did maybe get a bit complacent, and certainly defending the title in 2016 anyway, or 2017 rather. Like, does this help Liam Sheedy, plot that All-Ireland course?
Well, it's like this. Well, nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about Tip going for back. I think people are just talking about the fact that we're going to have championships, and anything that puts less pressure on a team or less expectation on a team, I think has to be a good thing. They're not going to have it rammed down their throats in the media. Well, I haven't seen it yet, and it's unlikely to see it. They haven't done the back-to-back since 64, 65. That's not the narrative this year. It's not, everybody says, people will be joking saying Tip are the kings of the one in a row. Like, nobody's talking about that anymore. Nobody's talking about them going for back-to-back. So I think it definitely has to be a plus. I think the lack of a preseason is a massive plus given the age profile of their squad. I think their squad in particular, and probably maybe a Kilkenny squad, that will help the likes of TJ Reid and Colin Fennelly. You ally that to Tipperary, Seamus Callan, Paddy Matter, Bonner Matter, Brendan Matter. They're all over 30. They're not going to have to go through a big 3-month preseason or anything like that. It does also, the way the games are going to be, the fact that they don't have a big preseason also brings in another question. Will players be able to last the 75 to 80 minutes that they've been conditioned to last over the last couple of years? So then that brings in strength of panels. And if you're looking at strength of panels, it's very hard to look past probably a Tipperary or a Limerick. Tipperary have won the last two under 21 and under 20 titles. They have a load of young players waiting to come through. Limerick the same. They have a big squad. They have a lot of interchangeable players that can come in and finish games. So I think with the way conditions are going to be and with the lack of a preseason, I think it still probably favours the strongest squads, and Tipperary definitely come into that. And the fact that they have no pressure is always a plus as well.
Yeah, and what about the favourites Limerick then? Obviously, they looked set to go back-to-back themselves last year after winning the league in style, winning the Munster Championship again. They beat Tipperary, but Brian Hogan was probably man of the match that day. He made a number of saves to keep the scoreline even to what it was. But then they ran into Kilkenny, that buzzsaw in the opening half, and never recovered. Yet they do look well primed again. Like, how do you assess them coming into the championship?
I watched Limerick play Galway earlier on in the league, and they're playing a style of hurling that does not look conducive to winter hurling. And then you think, how are they able to do this? It's so slick, short passing, little triangles, creating space, and they have it honed down to such a fine tee now that they're able to play that really, really high pressure, high skilled kind of game plan at any time of the year. So I think they're in a great position. You look at a couple of the best players in the Limerick Hurling Championship this year were probably David Dempsey, Conor Boylan, even like Paddy O'Loughlin, guys that aren't guaranteed starters with Limerick. They have a load of guys ready to come in. Now, I will say the loss of Mike Casey is huge. Looks like he's going to miss the whole championship and probably miss the next 8 to 9 months with a cruciate. Richie English did his cruciate against Galway earlier on this year in the league. He's only just getting back. John Kiley kind of non-committal. He said he'd play in a Limerick jersey over the coming months, whether that's this month or next month. Nobody really knows, or this weekend. But to be starting without your number 3 and your number 4, like who are they going to put full back? It'll be interesting. It's not like a wing back or a midfielder. It's so specialized. And like if they play Tipperary, their fullback, whoever that is going to be marking Seamus Callanan. If they bring in a rookie cornerback, he's probably going to be marking a Bubbles or a John McGrath. So they're not going to be like, they're going to be thrown straight into the fire. I believe Barry Nash, who came on last year, wing back in the All-Ireland semi-final, was brilliant. I believe he's been back cornerback. So that may be one of the slots kind of sorted. But the fact that they're coming in kind of with 2 big injuries is a concern, definitely a concern.
Yeah, and they a tough test against Clare this weekend, who, as you mentioned, are down a couple of key men going into the championship and have a very, very difficult path if they want to go through the front door anyway.
Yeah, no, like when you're looking at what Clare are missing, like Podge Collins, you're looking at Podge Collins, Peter Duggan, All-Star in 2018. Podge was obviously nominated for Hurler of the Year in 2013. John Conlon could have been Hurler of the Year in 2018. There's 3 of their big players missing. I think there's only 4 of the starting team from that 2013 All-Ireland replay win. I think it's Pat O'Connor, Tony Kelly, David McInerney, and Shane O'Donnell. They still have a very good team, but when you go from, just say you're losing 3 or 4 starters, so 3 or 4 lads have to come in and start in their place, which is fine. Your starting team is still strong. But what's coming in then with 20 or 25 minutes to go, or if there's a big injury early in the game, is not nearly as strong. And just, it's very, very hard to get away from the fact that they're missing 3 or 4 of the best players for the championship. It really, really is. The Podge Collins one is a funny one. He seems to have opted out for this year, and he's gone kicking football with his dad in Clare, which is, I don't know. I don't know whether to read into that, whether there's something going on or not. And Colin Galvin is obviously missing as well, who's their playmaker too. I just don't know. I just don't think they're going to have the strength in depth. Having Aaron Cunningham is back is an interesting one. This weekend's an interesting one too. Aaron Cunningham will probably be playing for Clare, and his father Alan is a coach with Limerick. And I think I was chatting to him earlier on the air, Aaron, and he kind of said his dad was probably happy to have him away over the last couple of years so that they wouldn't have these awkward kind of things at the breakfast table or the dinner table. But they'll obviously have it this weekend before this match. But very hard to get away from the fact what Clare are missing, the talent that they don't have available to them. And I'd be shocked if they were able to beat Limerick at the weekend.
And the other side of the draw, Cork and Waterford, as you mentioned, the Cork traditionally in the league over the last, 10 years or so, as you said, haven't really hit the heights they have later in the summer on occasion. And then for Waterford, Liam Cahill, new manager, he's left players like Noel Connors out of the squad. Now they're down Porrick Mahoney. Like, who's the favourite there, do you think?
Brendan Cummins always says that if the All-Ireland was played below the shoulders, that Cork would win it every year. And this is the opposite, the antithesis of that sort of an All-Ireland. It's going to be all real hard-won ball. You're going to need loads of ball winners. You're going to probably need loads of big kind of physical players. I'm not too sure if they have them. And I think if you look at some of their forwards, best forwards in the game, probably the likes of Alan Cadigan, Patrick Horgan, Shane Kingston, will some of them get gobbled up a small bit with the way conditions are going to be, with a kind of a heavy ball? They haven't performed in these conditions in recent years, so that would be a concern going in for Cork. But again, they have a point to prove. Then in that case, everybody's probably saying that they're not going to be suited to a winter championship, so they have a point to prove, and a new manager, obviously, with Kieran Kingston. There's very little talk about Cork. And maybe it's because of what I'm saying there. People just don't think conditions will be conducive for them. So it'll be interesting there. Liam Cahill has kind of shuffled the deck in Waterford, left off Noel Connors, obviously 3-time All-Star, and Maurice Shanahan, an All-Star as well. He's been gutted by injury in recent weeks. Conor Prunty, the vice captain, is still struggling with, I think it's a calf injury. Neil Montgomery has a hamstring injury, and Conor Gleeson has a hamstring injury as well. And now Porrick Mahoney, which looks like it could be a cruciate, which could see him out of not only this year's championship, but possibly next year's championship as well, which is a disaster for him after overcoming that horror leg break a couple of years ago and getting back to his best. Again, Waterford don't have those big physical players. The likes of Desi Hutchison, obviously a former professional soccer player, lightning fast, but like not 6'4", and with a brilliant hand on him. So you're that's an interesting semi-final. It's a great opportunity for both of them as well, because what's success for Waterford this year? Success is winning a championship game, because they haven't won one in 3 years. They can do that in their first game, and anything after that would be a massive, massive bonus. So a huge game for them there. Mahoney missing is a huge loss though as well, especially as captain as well. You'd probably be tipping the scales to Cork, but that should be a tight game, and there's a Munster final at play for both of those, which is a huge incentive before the year starts. Win one game and you're in a Munster final, and then you're in an All-Ireland quarter final thereafter.
Yeah, it's set up really nicely. Now, looking at Leinster now, you have Kilkenny playing the winners of Dublin and Laois, and then Wexford Galway on the other side of the draw. The odds would tell you that Kilkenny are the best placed team there to advance through the front door. How do you see it?
Yeah, similar to Tipperary. I think their age profile, the lack of pre-season, and how kind of this is kind of an all kind of a wham bam, thank you ma'am championship, very, very, very quick. I think it will suit some of their older players. The likes of TJ and Colin Fennelly they've been shooting the lights out with Ballyhale for the last 2 or 3 years, and with Kilkenny. So they're just bringing their club form straight into county. I think, like people can kind of be a bit kind of maybe fogged on what Brian Cody has achieved with Kilkenny. If you look, they haven't won All Ireland since 2015. Some people call it this year's the drive for 5. It'd be 5 years without an All Ireland, which would be kind of unheard of really in Kilkenny. But I'd argue to say that Brian Cody's best 2 performances with Kilkenny throughout his career were, one, probably winning the league title in 2018, and last year beating Limerick when nobody predicted in the All Ireland semi-final. I think they've built really, really nicely over the last couple of years, and I think they have a squad now. I don't think they had a squad up until this. They were probably over-reliant on TJ, but there's a couple of new players. One in particular, Owen Cody from Ballyhale. He's probably going to be thrown into the forward line. He scored 3-5 against Clare in a recent challenge game. He's probably going to be thrown into the forward line along with his club teammates. You throw maybe Billy Ryan, Walter Walsh, Richie Hogan into that forward line. All of a sudden, you're thinking, yeah, like these are definitely contenders with the best hurler in the game leading the line from centre forward. They've shored up things at the back with Hugh Lawler coming in. I think young Tommy Walsh, as he's called, from Tullaroan, I think he'll probably stake a claim for a corner back spot. Killian Buckley looks like he's going to miss the Leinster semi-final with a broken thumb, but they've still got serious strength in depth. Pádraig Walsh in defence, one of the best defenders in the game. So I think they're in a great position coming in. I couldn't see them not being in a Leinster final. It'd be a massive shock if they're not in a Leinster final.
And the other side of the draw, Galway, Wexford, a blockbuster clash to kick things off. They're playing in 2 weeks' time. Wexford obviously have had a bit of COVID disruption. And then Galway, I saw Joe Canning talking last week when he's saying he basically hasn't really played championship since 2018 because he only got a very brief cameo off the bench against Dublin when they were defeated in that upset last year. Or so it was almost 2 years ago now. But, how do you read that game? Like, Galway, I think, are marginal favourites, but, there could be an upset there as well.
Yeah, I asked Eddie Brennan last week. I said, Eddie, if this was your first year with Laois, what do you think you would have done? And he kind of laughed and said, I think I nearly would have packed it in. He said, just with everything, all the kind of turbulence throughout the year. And that's what Shane O'Neill has had to deal with in his first year. Like this is Davy's 4th year. He knows his squad really well. He trusts his squad. They know the way they have to play. They know exactly what they have to do. Shane O'Neill came in with Galway, probably out of the blue. I don't think anybody would have seen him maybe as Galway manager, despite his experience with and success with Napiershig. He's come in, they were just starting to bed things down nicely in the league. Just before lockdown hit, they had a brilliant performance against Tipp and Salt Hill. Then they're gone for 6 or 7 months. They've only been back like all teams since mid-September. But when you're coming in as a new manager, they're still trying to sort out a style of play, still trying to find out who is playing where. So I think they've a good few questions to answer. They were beaten fairly convincingly by Limerick in a challenge game a couple of weeks ago. You have Limerick who know exactly what they have to do, like Wexford, and Galway maybe who are not sure who should be playing where and still kind of learning on their feet. The Dahi Burke situation is very, very interesting. If he's not fit to play, did they leave Gerard McInerney full back, or did they put Fintan Burke in full back, who was brilliant for Thomas's? If Dahi Burke is fit to play, does he put him in full back where we know he'll play well, or does he leave him out midfield where he's been playing great stuff for Turlock Moore? It's an interesting one. I wouldn't be surprised if Galway were beaten and got a run through the back door and found out exactly what their best team was. But saying that too, Galway have probably had the stranglehold on Wexford in recent years. And you have to remember as well, Davy's back there. He's obviously not back there, for nothing. He obviously thinks they can win All Ireland. They were very, very close to a final last year. So like what's success for Wexford this year? Probably a minimum getting to something like an All Ireland final or winning a Leinster title and getting back to a semi-final or a final. That's probably success for them this year. Just on the game we probably haven't touched on, Laois and Dublin is a really interesting one this weekend as well, because you'd expect Dublin to be spitting fire at Laois after that massive upset last year, dumped them out of the championship. I think it was on June 15th. Like Dublin looked like they were not that they maybe serious All-Ireland contenders, but they were just on the edge of maybe Limerick, Tipp, these teams. When they beat Galway, then all of a sudden they were dumped out of Championship 2 weeks later. They're going to be mad for revenge against Laois. Don't think they'll have it all their own way though, and I don't know if Dublin are even as strong as they were last year. So I expect Laois to put it up to them there. But Dublin, like a defeat would be an absolute disaster for Matty Kenny in Dublin. If they're beaten by Laois for the second year in a row, like he'd probably under serious pressure there. But loads of interesting little subplots there before we get to it. Like there's going to be some amount of water under the bridge before we get to a Leinster final, whoever's in it.
Yeah, and Laois Dublin this Saturday as well to kick off the Hurling Championship. Just a word, Michael, on the John McDonagh and Christy Ring Cups. I think Westmeath probably favourites in the John McDonagh, and then your own County Offaly looking to bounce straight back up, I guess, in Christy Ring.
Yeah, the Joe McDonagh is an interesting one. Chatting to Darren Gleeson only the last couple of days there, and he's obviously had a bit of a COVID scare. They've had a player test positive for COVID after winning the Division 2A league final against Kerry at the weekend. But he was just saying about the Joe McDonagh in particular, he literally could throw a blanket over the 5 teams in the Joe McDonagh. The fact that there's no relegation this year from the Joe McDonagh because there's going to be 6 teams next year probably means you can go at it even more. There's the safety net there. You're not worried about, if you're 3 points down, pushing on to try and keep in a game, because if you get bet by 10, you're under pressure for score difference. Teams can really go for it. Westmeath have added Noah Larkin to their backroom team, and they've also added Davy Glennon, the former Galway player. They're still up in the air whether he'll actually be eligible to play this weekend. They start off against Antrim. Antrim missing Neil McManus, who limped off at the weekend in the league final. Tough task for Westmeath heading up to kind of a buoyant kind of an Antrim team just after winning league title. They're going up. They have Division 1 hurling next year. They're absolutely delighted with themselves. And then look at Kerry. Kerry have been thereabouts the last couple of years. They're capable. The teams in the Joe McDonagh, they're all capable of beating each other on a given day. Then you have Carlow coming back down from the Leinster Championship. Colin Bonner, I think most people thought he was going to probably leave Carlow. He's like, what's his goal for the season? His sole goal for the season is to get back up to the Leinster Championship for next year. So there's a massive incentive. And as I wrote my piece for the Championship magazine preview there at the weekend, like the absurdity of the Munster Championship rules will be brought up again if Kerry were to win the Joe McDonagh. The fact that they'd have to play a relegation/promotion game against I don't know what way that would work this year, to be honest with you, with the bottom team in Munster. I don't know what that would. So like you kind of just, I'd say there's people up in Croke Park just hoping that these kind of scenarios don't play out. As regards the Christy Ring, like Michael Fennelly's coming in with Offaly, the only success for Offaly this year is just to get up out of the Christy Ring and get back into the Joe McDonagh. Their opening game this weekend, Fennelly comes up against David Herity, his old Kilkenny teammate. So there's loads at stake there. The fact that there is a back door in the Christy Ring also helps any team, if they do get caught the first day, that they be able to kind of bounce back and regroup. But Jesus, I'd be shocked if anyone but Offaly is winning the Christy Ring. But again, they're a big name team. We're obviously in All-Ireland only 20 years ago. Everyone will raise their game for them as well, which is going to be interesting too. And loads of interesting names. Only 3 teams in the Laurie Mar this year. And I'd expecting Louth to be winning that. And I probably have Donegal as favourites for the Nicky Racker. They have Declan Coulter, the ex-Armagh player, and Davin Flynn, ex-Tipperary underage player. But yeah, loads of games going to be coming thick and fast. It's great to be able to look forward to it.
No, definitely. And just to wrap up then, I want your provincial winners and your All-Ireland finalists and All-Ireland winners in the Hurling Championship.
Yeah, funnily enough, I had my jury selections sent in for the Independent magazine before I realised Mike Casey was out, and that does actually change my kind of opinion on it. I think Limerick will probably still win Munster, but I think by the time they get to the All-Ireland stage, it could be vulnerable, particularly if they pick up an injury. So I'm going for Limerick for Munster, Kilkenny for Leinster, and Tipperary for the All-Ireland.
Finally, a back-to-back in Tipp for the first time, as you said, since 1965, which will set things up nicely. But what a mouth-watering couple of weekends we have in store in the Hurling Championship. Michael, thanks so much for joining me.
Cheers, Matt.
And that's all we have time for on the Throne this week in association with Board Gosh Energy. Thank you so much for listening, and we will be back next week to review all the action. And in the meantime, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, or listen on independent.ie. Until next week, thanks for listening.
Board Gosh Energy, proud sponsor of the GAA All-Ireland Under-20 and Senior Hurling Championships. #Hurling to the Core.